Thank you for keeping it KTS. Remember, this is the Economy Trend Pointer, and our topic today is on the Iebc budget and funding. And Dr. Faisi, in Kenya we've experienced a very high recurrent bill regarding the many public wage bill. We've had the many loans that have been borrowed. The government has to pay back. And sure, we can also see the 45 billion that the MBC is asking for. Does it mean that all this will have the government to borrow more at the expense of development, Doc?
I think that the election is very important and a very serious thing in governance, and we cannot take it lightly. It's better even we starve for one day, but the election is done very well. Yeah. Because you know the consequences when things are not done well. Sure. So what we are saying is Kenya generates over $1 trillion shillings, right? And they have told us like that. Now they are going to have a little more, around 2 trillion shillings, our budget, the 2016-2017. What is 45 billion from 2 trillion that they are thinking about? If they can prioritize and say that election is very important, they can stop other things, some of the things that are not very imagined, that are not very important for now, and make sure that we have all that it takes to have free and fair elections. What am I saying? I'm saying, one, we need to have gadgets that are working. Number two, we need to have enough clerks in the polls and those who will assist people when they are doing that. That's very important. So it is, so long as the 45 billion is being used prudently, we need it, and we don't need to borrow from outside. We can fund it from our own budget, which is now going to be almost 2 trillion shillings. Sure. So that is how I'm saying that we don't need to borrow. And even we don't need even to ask foreign countries, because if you ask them, they will dictate how you want to be governed. Do you want to be governed? Yeah. We got independence. Yeah. They may chip in, but this thing of saying they have to bring money to fund, I think that is not the right thing. We need to 100% fund this. Whether we shall have only once a week tea in public offices, and the 4 days money goes to Iebc to effect elections, so be it.
Yeah, that's a very serious issue, that we may not be able to come by that money through through our own resources. But you see, the prospect of borrowing so that we pay for elections is something that I take really seriously, because, well, it's part of governance. But you see, there is not money that will get into development. I want to say this, that if 45 million and so forth can be properly rationalized, and that it can go far in enabling us have good elections, fair elections, democratic elections, so be it. But let us not use elections for purposes of rent seeking. Sure. There is a problem all over Africa, all over developing countries. In Africa, sometimes they say, according to a proverb, I think from Cameroon, that a goat eateth where it is tethered. I hope that the Iebc, people who are working there, do not want to transform Kenyan elections into a huge business from which they want to eat. Because ultimately, and this is my worry, whether we borrow money from outside, whether we borrow money internally, it is the taxpayer, the common man, the Wanjiku, who is going to pay for electing leaders. I find that rather curious. I find it very paradoxical.
Mr. Ciele, we have said that the 45 billion will have to be borrowed. But for instance, the 45 billion is not borrowed, but it's received from donors as well as the Kenya People Fund. But we'll still have to borrow for the sake of development. What do you have to say on the same?
We'll still have to borrow for the sake of the development.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, one thing is we must be able to, and if we don't have the money, I say IEBC funds or election cost is part of the government. To me, it is an expenditure which must be incurred.
Yeah.
That is a totality to which we must agree. It is not a by the way expenditure. It is part of the government expenditure. Now, if we have to borrow, if you look at the way the borrowing is, you'll find that we are even saying we don't want to borrow from outside. We'll get the funds from within. If you look at the way it's around 10% or some that percentage, but 90% is from us. Now, if we are saying that we are going to utilize the 90%, which is from within, from our taxes and collections, to me we are almost owning the election cost, because we are only saying give us 10%. But if we go ahead and say we get 100% from within, well and good. But I must insist that election is part of, election cost is part of the government expenditure. It must budget for it. It must be. The only scenario which is actually surrounding it is the usage of individualistic, where you want to benefit from the so-called the chicken and call them whatever you want to call them. But that is the only challenge. Otherwise, the cost itself to me is not an issue. So in terms of the investment, you'll find that yes, we want to invest, that is good, but it is part of it. I don't want us to remove the expenditure and say we should have spent this 45 billion in investing. No, it is part of the expenditure of the government.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think what people are failing to understand, election is development. Because election is part of development. Because if you want even development to flourish even more, let there be peace. And there can only be peace when we have fair election being done and everything. Otherwise, if you say you don't want to spend money on election, and then you have very few resources for elections, and then we disagree because we are not seeing things going smoothly, the country may be in trouble, like 2007. So what we need is to avoid that scenario where we can have problems. We scare investors away because they don't know how election will come out. It is better we invest more in this election so that we can tell investors wherever they are, our election is going to be very transparent because we have resources for it, and it will be done fair, and within a day we shall say we have finished that, we are moving on. So borrowing, for me, I'm disagreeing to borrow outside, because inside we are generating money, and we need to own this process. And this thing of running every time outside to go and borrow, and you add more external debt to what we have, which will then affect our Kenya shilling, I avoid it. It's better we can just get it from the money we generate locally.
What I want to say that would help ameliorate a situation whereby all of a sudden the IEBC requires 45 billion. I think what the IEBC lacks and what the government itself lacks is planning. We all know in Kenya that every 5 years we have elections. Why should issues such as registration, voter registration, why should issues such as tendering for whatever we need for elections come on the eve of elections? Why can't we look ahead and say, we've had elections now, next 5 years we're going to have another election, and we plan for it so that we register voters early enough. We purchase these requirements early enough so that the IEBC doesn't have to ambush Kenyans, ambush the taxpayer, that we need this money. these are monies that the Kenyan government can definitely generate. But, given time, if it is well planned as the recurrent expenditure, catering for elections, then I think we'd have easier time financing our own elections. Now, if we have to rely on donors, then it would be like we are mortgaging our political freedom. Because they'll say, we helped you conduct these elections, the new government must just do what we want them to do. And by so doing, they'll take away power from Kenyans to tell their elected leaders what to do.
Gentlemen, as we finalize, we've seen that 10% of the 45 billion will come from foreign donors. Do these donors have any impact on the election process or even on the results? Dr. says.
Yeah, some of the donors who give us money, and I normally pray that they give it as a grant so that they are helping us. In the form of assisting to fund monitoring people from outside Kenya. Bringing them from Sweden, US, where to come and monitor the fairness of election. If they can be able to do that, then there is no problem. But for me, I feel strongly that IEBC must be locally funded so that we can own the process and own the results. And that is what my belief is.
Thank you. I think the 10%, I must appraise the Kenya, the people who are budgeting and all that, because if you look at the 2013, we actually spent 35% from outside. That is the donors were 35. 2017 is 10%. Now, come 2022, my prayer it will be 0. And if it will be any percentage, as far as my Dr. said, I think it is they should not give us any cash. They should come in some form of assistance, gadgets and all that, so that we don't divert that funds which is meant for the elections into something else. But I must say that with the monies we are spending, the 45 billion, is only my prayer that we get positive results out of this huge spending from whatever, so that Mwananchi can be able to say, yes, we have spent 45 billion. At the end of it all, I see that my vote has actually entered into where I had placed, so that we can be able to say, yes, election has been fair, there is fair election, and good results will be there. So that is the only prayer, that is my only prayer, and a prayer for the team, that we get the positive results from the huge expenses we are incurring. Thank you.
I want to say one thing. The question reminds me about what late Professor Ali Mazrui said in his lecture series. He said that, you see, you can teach other people how to speak English, how to do other things. One thing you cannot teach another people is how to govern themselves. I want to add and say that one thing you can't do, you can maybe help people to develop industries, you can help them develop their agriculture. One thing you can't help them do through financing is elections. I don't see how we cannot, as Kenyans, manage our own elections. But having said that, let me say that we have come a long way. We have come a long way in the sense that the IEBC is a new creation, a creation that is much better than the former Electoral Commission. You see, in earlier days, the president handpicked members of the Electoral Commission. Now, imagine what would happen during elections. The people who worked for the Electoral Commission had to do the bidding of the person who appointed them. Now the IEBC is, as the name refers, is independent, and we hope that as an independent Electoral Commission, they will do a good job. They're supposed to do a good job. their independence can only be underlined if they rule out completely any financial assistance from outside, because it's one way, in whatever form that assistance comes, those who have assisted will want to have a say in how we govern ourselves. And that is why I still believe that it's not really proper for other countries to ever finance the way we want to elect our own leaders.
That is all we had for today's episode of the Independent Electoral Boundary Commission's Funding and Budgeting. Thank you for keeping it KTS. You can send your comments on our Facebook page, that is the Economy Trend Pointer. I've been your host, Immaculate Bulunja. Until next time, God bless you.
All models in economics are talking about money. It is only how that money is used.
The way we have been paying our debt has really been increasing with figures as we go along.
And we borrow to pay, which means that we find ourselves and our country in a situation of perpetual dependency.